thank you for joining us for this edition of Our View,
the show that explores topics from our seat in poverty and the way it shapes our world.
Tonight we'll be discussing poverty and minimum wage. Our guest, Alyssa Stewart, is Vice President of Impact and Engagement for United Way of Greater Battle Creek and Kalamazoo Region. Welcome, Alyssa.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, all right, ladies, this is a wide and very divided topic. When we do the research for this, it's very wide and divided. There are some people that are really for raising it to $15, and then there's some other people that says that it'll just crush our economy.
Right.
For those who live in BC, which is what the show is about, it's still a wide and very divided topic, even when you talk local. For us, we see the side of it of the working families that are working hard, they're doing 40 plus hours a week, and barely struggling to put food on the table.
Mm-hmm.
And look, this is personal for me because I was that single mom with 3 children. In fact, it's personal to the history of co-op because it's how we got our start.
Mm-hmm.
I was a single mom, again, with 3 babies, and I worked long-term care and was doing, 50, sometimes 60 hours a week and still not being able to feed my family.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this one fateful night that just made me feel empty as a human. I go to the refrigerator to make dinner for my kids, and there's only a pack of Pork Chops. And I call my best friend on the phone, and I'm just in tears. I am worthless as a mother. I can't even feed my kids. I seriously thought she hung up on me. Whoa, dude, I'm in crisis here. But then there's this knock at the door, and there she is with a bag of potatoes and some green beans and some applesauce and this game Twister, which I now love. And an hour or 2 later, I forgot that I couldn't feed my kids. And co-op was born out of that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also born out of that struggle that we're not just talking about people who sit back and do nothing. We're talking about people who worked like I did. This is a powerful struggle and story, and one that's elevated collective voices for 17 years. My story is the reason why we've elevated so many more stories in the community. But there's another story that's out there about a lady named Alice.
Mm-hmm.
So, Alyssa, who is Alice, and why is her story important?
Yeah, her story is important too. So ALICE is an acronym for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, and Employed, which is a lot of fancy words, which really are exactly what you just spoke about. They are people in our community who are working hard every single day, but who are struggling to make ends meet on a weekly, monthly basis. Historically and even recently, they've been sometimes called working poor, which we love that Alice humanizes that name. Working poor still sort of places blame in a way on those individuals. What we love about the Alice Report is that it, and that acronym is that it humanizes it. It makes it a person, and that's what's important. Data can be dehumanizing sometimes. It can be numbers on a page.
Sure.
But the Alice Report really seeks to paint a picture and to tell that story of Alice and Alice households headed by men and women across our community that are struggling to make ends meet.
And this is really important work to United Way. We're a partner in United Way and a grantee, and we know that this is at the top of everybody's mind at United Way, that this work is important, and part of that is raising the minimum wage, correct?
Absolutely. So this is at the heartbeat of our impact work at United Way, at who we partner with, the initiatives, and the work we do. And it's something that we talk about with the companies that we partner with. We partner with awesome companies in Battle Creek, and their employees give generously to our annual campaign that allows us to make grants to organizations like Women's Co-op. And that's an example of community caring for each other, right? We know some of the people giving to United Way are Alice workers.
Right.
Right? They are Alice, and yet they see value in that collective care and in taking care of each other and the community. So it's really powerful. So we know it matters to our donors, and we know it definitely matters to us as an organization, because what the data shows us is that it's not the few. It's not just a few people in Battle Creek and Calhoun County struggling with this issue. It's 39% of households. Our most recent report was released in March, and it shows that 39% of households in Calhoun County are struggling to make ends meet. They're either in this ALICE category, where they're above the federal poverty line, but below what the report establishes, which is called this ALICE threshold. The really cool thing about the report is it uses a real budget. like a budget like we all have in our households,
Right.
housing, childcare, transportation, food, all of those things, uses local data to establish that what's called a survival budget. And then it ties to that the annual wage that it would take to reach that threshold. So that's really powerful data. And what that shows us is that if you averaged that wage requirement across different household configurations, like a single adult or a single adult with a child, or two adults with two children in childcare, what the Alice report landed at is actually that $20 an hour would be the sort of what they would consider a good paying job, where most
could
families could make, in most configurations, that wage could afford most families the ability to get above that survival threshold.
So the three of us sitting here, we know this stuff, right? We work with the families every day. You know this stuff. What do you say to those companies and those small businesses that say, I can't pay $15 an hour? Like, it would close my business if I had to pay $15 an hour.
Yeah. I think the important thing, when we talk to companies about this and share this data, our intent is never to shame or blame. We're all part of systems, right? We're part of a labor force or an economic system that constrains our choices, or what we perceive to be choices. An important thing that when we talk to companies like that, that maybe have run the numbers and really feel like they cannot pay or increase their wages that significantly, we always encourage them to start small, to not feel overwhelmed, right? To really pick somewhere and start. It might not be getting everyone to $15 tomorrow. It might be making incremental changes and committing to making those incremental changes over time to increase wages.
But what happens, though, if they do pass the federal law that says minimum wage has to be raised to $15 an hour, and you're forced to do it, like, right now?
Yeah.
Like, you know, one of the things that people say to me all the time is daycare.
Right.
They're like, look at the cost of daycare now, and what happens if we have to start paying daycare workers $15 an hour? That dramatically goes up.
Yeah.
But then there's an answer to that, because there's daycare credits.
Yeah,
right?
I think fundamentally, public policy, state and federal resources are going to have to play a part in this, right? We know there have been programs historically that have helped make childcare more affordable. We know the stimulus, all of the American Rescue Plan Act and all of the stimuluses that have happened because of COVID, those are almost pilots in a way, testing this. We know this child care credit is going to be happening right now for many families in our community. They're going to start getting monthly payments to support them. So those are almost tests in a way of what can happen if greater, more accessible financial assistance is available to families. And the ranges kind of vary. For, I would say, those federal stimulus guidelines, the income guidelines, they cover some Alice families, not all.
Right.
But they cover a good amount of them. So a lot of families are going to get that assistance, and it'll be interesting to see how that changes the choices they can make.
Absolutely, because when you think about it, when we look at Alice families, because Women's Co-op is a network of resources in the community and then our families. So we're not necessarily always providing the supportive services. Sometimes we're looking within our community for it. And what we find is a lot of that Alice population doesn't qualify for any of those things. And it was even interesting that, so the eviction thing.
Eviction diversion?
Yeah. So now there's evictions happening, and so, okay, we're going to dump a bunch of money into communities to help with that. But it's only for those people who are at that low income and qualify. So what do you do with these folks that did work at, let's say, Denso, and they made enough money where they don't qualify, but because there was lulls in their work and the unemployment wasn't all straight, they fell behind, they're not going to qualify for any of that assistance.
Yeah, and that
happens a lot.
Yeah, so that is one of the reasons why, when we had our first report several years ago, the first Alice report, United Way felt compelled to begin focusing more explicitly on this population because of exactly what you're saying. So the difference is pretty huge between the federal poverty level and Alice. So for example, for a single adult, the federal poverty line would be income up to about $12,000 annually. $12,000 annually. I mean, that's about $1,000 a month in income. If that person made over that, they would be over the federal poverty line. But if you use the survival budget and the Alice report, that survival budget threshold for a single adult is $24,000. So that just shows the gap between what the federal poverty line represents, and that's, to your point, what a lot of things consider eligibility. like a lot of cases, that's a proxy for eligibility for a lot of programs. So we know there are people who are right above the federal poverty line or somewhere between that. In that instance, the gap of making $12,000 a year and making $24,000 a year, and they may lose eligibility for a lot of the really critical services, and there aren't other services that they can access potentially. So
Well, and it's interesting where those lines are too, because Department of Health and Human Services, state emergency relief funds.
Yeah.
Okay, so I make less, so I can qualify for the SCR funds, but then I don't qualify for assistance because I don't make enough money to afford where I live.
Those cliffs.
So like that line is so thin there.
Yeah, those cliffs are unfortunate. Before my time at United Way, I actually worked in the welfare system. I worked for Michigan Works for a program called the PATH program, which was cash assistance, right?
Okay, right.
And we all the time dealt with that, where families were really dependent on that cash assistance, which, to be clear, was not a lot of money. It was still a very small amount of money, very difficult to live on. For a family with children, which you have to have children to be eligible for cash assistance. And we would have moms and dads making those tough choices about, if I accept this job or more hours at my current job, I risk losing my child care subsidy, maybe my housing voucher, like all of these services. So there becomes this unintentional disincentivizing. And that's what people are talking about a lot right now with unemployment, that the unemployment system right now, it's being said to disincentivize people from returning to work, but I just think that's an unfair assessment in many ways, because people have to take care of their families and have to make financial choices that make sense. And so we have to figure that out, of how do we create the wages that can allow people to have some stability. Yeah, because
if I were working and making $280, $300 a week, which is what a lot of our moms are in that window, and then suddenly, because of unemployment benefits, I'm making almost $6 a week, I'm not going back to work until this runs out. Like, I'm going to ride that gravy train.
Well, and now I can spend time with my family, and I
don't have those daycare expenses.
I can do the things I can do, and so I keep thinking, I think that's important. Like, I actually think it's really amazing in some ways that we're allowing families who in many cases have not had choices to choose to be home, or have been working 3-4 jobs and have not been able to spend time with their kids or be as involved with their education as maybe they wanted to. Some of those families, those people have now been able to be at home with their kids and to spend that time and to be more involved in their education and support their virtual learning or their hybrid learning. And on some, I think that's an amazing thing, that's a choice that a lot of low income families have been stripped of, and these benefits are giving them that temporary option. And I think we should lift that up. I hope it's strengthening families in this time that they can be together. I hope that it makes a
difference in how we look at services in the future. When this pandemic stuff goes away and we look back and say, but when we were doing this after the pandemic, look at the difference that it made.
We were able to be flexible. We were able to create ways for people to receive services that were more remote and that required less transportation, required less, were more accessible. I think that's important, that we do want to keep that for families.
And I don't think it's impossible to think about either. I mean, 29 states already have a minimum wage that's higher than the federal minimum wage.
Yeah.
So it's not like we're not all thinking about this as a country.
Yeah, I think.
And we have local. Well, they're not local because they're big box stores, but like Target is paying $50 an hour now, and
as a former Target employee, when I used to work at Target in my high school, I made $7 an hour. So to see the increase in wages that a lot of those retailers have made to stay competitive, it's been really interesting. Another element to the wage piece that I would just lift up, that's highlighted in the Alice report, is that in Calhoun County in 2019. There were actually more full-time hourly jobs than there were full-time salaried jobs. So minimum wage is a part of it, but being salaried or hourly is also a critical part of that, because we know that salaried jobs have more consistency. Right? You know what your paycheck's going to be each week. You can budget and plan around that. And generally, salaried jobs also have paid time off. Which make you have a little bit more flexibility. If things come up, you can take that time and not lose wages. And that's a hugely impactful part too, because for a lot of the hourly workers in Battle Creek and Calhoun County, there's that fluctuation. There's sometimes overtime, which is awesome, but then there's sometimes those slowdowns or shutdowns that can really cut your wages, and it's harder to budget and plan and really create some savings that could help you buffer that.
I think all too often, you're right, we tend to want to blame the individual for their situation. I have a lot of well-intentioned, meaningful folks that are in my circle, and I have these discussions often, and they will say to me, well, why didn't they go to college? Why didn't they get a better job? Why didn't they stay at the job and try to raise themselves up? Like, this is the way things are done. Everybody gets an opportunity. But that's just not true anymore. I mean, look at our own community. We're really rich in manufacturing and production, and you go out to get any of those jobs, and you're not going to start at an Alice wage, and they're all big companies.
Yeah, I think that's really an important piece. Alice showed us, too, that the narrative in some cases of exactly what you just said of these are folks that aren't as educated, or that's actually not true. We found that there were Alices that had high school diplomas, that didn't have a high school diploma or GED, that had those, that had associate's degrees, bachelor's degrees, master's degrees. There are people with PhDs who are being paid Alice wages currently. Adjunct professors are an example in some cases,
my goodness.
right? Our PhDs have studied and studied, are experts in their field, but in some cases at some colleges and schools are being paid those wages. And I'm talking at kind of the high national level. But so that's an important thing to debunk in a way, is that there are people, I think the childcare space that you mentioned is a huge one. We have lots of childcare workers who have associates, bachelor's degrees, who are passionate about what they do and who trained to do that work, who are doing jobs that we need. Sometimes the narrative that everyone could sort of choose to pack up and go to a better job, then what would we do? If tomorrow all of our childcare workers left and took a job somewhere else, our society would crumble. We are so dependent on those caretakers, our nursing assistants, our CNAs, our medical assistants, our child care and elder care workers. So we need these people. We should value these people and value these roles and pay them wages and give them supports, wrap around them, and give them the support that would allow them to stay in the jobs that they're trained, qualified to do.
Well, I also think it's interesting, too, Valerie and I were having a conversation the other day, that the PATH program and some other local initiatives trying to move people from welfare to work. And one of the best ways they'll use is CENA, because it's a quick turnaround, most people can get through it, and then you're on the road to upward mobility. But is that really true? Because none of those positions pay a living wage either.
Right.
Yeah. The critical thing would be, in an example like that, would be bridging it to other what they call upskilling programs, right? So how do you take that quick turnaround and get someone into a CNA role, and then from there, once they're employed, how do you work to maybe give them a pathway to nursing school, or then sort of the next level of credential, if they're interested in that would allow them, right, to have that mobility and to be paid a wage that then takes them to that next level. So they call it kind of career laddering, right? And I know Michigan Works and other partners are working on creating those pipelines where we want there to be options for those folks, right, who get a job now, but what are those opportunities for upward mobility?
I think that's difficult too, though, you guys, because like in my situation, I was a single mom, and I was already working 40 plus hours a week. How was I going to fit school into that too? I mean, when would I see my children? And I think a lot of our moms struggle with that. For that get ahead piece, when will I see my kids?
And
Somebody
they're
else
already
is
struggling
virtually.
to get daycare while they're working those 40 hours a week. Who's going to watch the kids the additional 10, 12 hours a day while they're in school? I know KCC is working on a program now. It's called Next Step.
Yeah.
You graduate from the CENA program, and then they offer you a scholarship to pay your tuition for you to enroll in the next step in your career ladder.
That's awesome.
That's something that's just recently started, and they're out there, they're putting it out there quickly so that folks can take advantage of it.
Yeah, that is interesting. And that's why I think the employers, that's a space where the employers can be partners, what you just mentioned, because that's a great example of it. It would benefit them too to have their employees have those skills, right? So can they create opportunities where within the 40-hour work week, some of that training and education could happen, right? Some can be on the job training, sort of apprenticeship models, or on the job learning, but then maybe they can get some time during the week where they could actually do their coursework on site. So that's an example of that collaborative approach, right? The important thing is we're all in this together. Employers, the ones that maybe feel they can't pay more, but they still don't want to lose their employees, right? They want to keep their talented team members. And so sometimes it's thinking creatively about how can we provide other supports? How do we think about our benefits, our paid time off? How do we think about other partnerships or collaborations like with KCC or other organizations that could bring benefits and supports to our employees on the job? That maybe we can't change the wages tomorrow, but are there other things we could do that could make this a more supportive work environment?
Sure.
For Alice.
Absolutely.
So talk to us about the work that United Way is doing around this. So I know that you put the Alice report out every year annually. You're having conversations with employers. Do you feel like there's something that you're doing outside of that that's actually pushing this forward locally, or?
Yeah, so I think some examples I would give, like I said, it kind of drives a lot of our thinking, a lot of our focus. So in our grant making work, we're always seeking to support partners in maybe broadening their reach, thinking about how they could offer services and supports to people who are maybe above their traditional income eligibility requirements, like we talked about. But a lot of our initiative work, I would say, touches on this too. We are doing some awesome work. We've historically participated in things like BC Vision and other things that are really focused on bringing vitality and jobs back into the community. And we, even through our disaster relief fund, which we recently launched around COVID, we really did some work around hazard pay and other things like that within our nonprofit sector that allowed for the workers that couldn't go remote, right, that needed to be on in the office, providing direct food, shelter, all of those things. We supported some hazard pay for those folks to help, offset in many ways the risk and acknowledge the critical work they were doing. We're doing some awesome work with a project called Catalyzing Community Giving, which my colleague, Dr. Nakia Bayless, is leading. And that's really focused on building the overall vitality, but specifically focusing on our Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities here in Battle Creek, and giving those groups more power over their own economic futures. So creating supports and services driven by those populations, our Burmese populations, our Black and Native and Indigenous populations, and really in driving their own initiatives and their own work and finding what's important to them, what services would meet their needs, and making those happen in our community.
So that's about making grants available to those.
So it's about investing.
In it.
It's making a lot of the nonprofits. We have awesome nonprofits, Burma Center, BOSES, all these awesome Urban League, all doing kind of deeply serving communities, the Burmese community, the Hispanic Latino community. And we want to build and support their sustainability so that they can be around forever and doing the awesome work they're doing, and that they can be really free to focus on the awesome, impactful work they're doing. And we can help support and help them build their financial stability as organizations so that they can do that good work and continue to do that. So it's kind of about building philanthropy within communities of color, building, again, their own resources and power so that they don't have to depend on funders like United Way, right?
Sure.
As funders, we never want to create dependency on our funds. We want to empower organizations and partner with them so that they can do their missions and impact the people that they seek to impact.
It's nice, though, that you're bringing that awareness too, because I think sometimes when you're in doing the work, you're not always able to come up here and see what's happening from that helicopter view, and maybe not considering, because you don't see these families that are outside that limit that you have, that cutoff point. You're not seeing those families, so unless someone makes you aware that they're out there, chances are you're not going to be aware of that.
Yeah, and that's the important thing that we've been trying to lift up, is just that Alice is in every room. Like, there is an Alice, most likely, just based on those numbers, right? Knowing 39% of households. There is an Alice in every room. And one thing that I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about, because whenever we talk about this, we're trying to talk about the data disaggregated by race, too.
Sure.
Because you mentioned, again, that narrative that, or blame placed on people, but we know that there are systems that impact these economic outcomes. We know there's wage disparities, right? We know women of color are much less likely, they're making less than their white male counterparts, for example, or their white female counterparts. All of that compounds and creates the situation. So it's important to say that we see Alice is not failing. Alice is doing the best they absolutely can and working so hard. The systems are failing Alice.
Right. Which was my next question, which was going to be, what do we do locally to reshape our systems, or not even locally, like the state and federal systems? Like, what can we do here in Battle Creek for our residents, and then what can we do to shape that nationally?
The first I would say is name the disparities. So to hit on that, we know that here in Calhoun County and Battle Creek that our Black and Latina, Hispanic households and our Asian households are more likely to be living below the ALICE threshold, so in poverty or in that ALICE threshold, than their white counterparts. And so one is we need to acknowledge that, right? We can't, ALICE is an awesome acronym, but we also don't want that to then lump people together and to become a homogenous group. We know that different people have different experiences. And so that's an important one, is to just dig into the data and understand it and understand the nuances. There's awesome data. I'll share a website. It's unitedforalice.org/Michigan. That's a new online data center where you can dig into this and look at county by county data. There's also township and city data for Calhoun County. So you can actually look and see the trends for the city of Battle Creek, the trends for Albion, the trends for all of the different parts of Calhoun County. So that's really powerful too. Data is power. But overall, what we can do to reshape it, I think one is to acknowledge, to help to shift the narrative that this is just a minority of people who are struggling, which then makes it feel like it's their fault or something that they're doing wrong, but that this is a huge a group of folks that is important and that is doing critical work and deserves our respect and our care as a community. And then I think we'd love for us to start thinking at many of the collaborative tables, as we've already started to do, about ways that we can collaborate, even some of the ideas we hatched right here, right? What are ways that we could collaborate and do that? And we need to advocate.
And how do we support those other small businesses and places that would struggle?
How do we lift up? How do we lift up organizations that are?
Because I think that's important to us too. It's important to you. It's important to United Way. So I want to thank you for joining us today. We are always appreciative of the work that you and United Way do.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
I think it's very important in our community, and so we really appreciate you coming to talk about this very important work.
Absolutely.
We're also still doing a sort of collective voice in our own way by doing the She Speaks Strength campaign. I know that you've heard about that. And so I'm actually wearing the Malayla Yousafzai shirt. We thought that she was a very important woman global hero. And then Valerie is wearing our local hero, Barb Travis, who is Val, help me with that title.
She is the chief director at the Hubs. She has a fancier title, but I don't remember what it is right now.
And so a very close person to you, Dr. Nakia Bayless, is going to be featured in June as our local hero. We're excited and thrilled about that. So that'll be coming out next month. And you can order the shirts by going to our website, or you can just call and contact Women's Co-op. You can email us, you can call us. They're $25 a piece, and again, the money for these shirts go to a really good cause. So I want to highlight that they're being made by our industrial sewing team, who has a Cricut station now, and they're teaching how you can Cricut wonderful shirts and cups and blankets and all sorts of things. So you're also supporting that program when you go and buy one of these shirts. All right, ladies.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks for joining us.